Going back, for week 4, we will be focusing on writing your research introduction. Hopefully, by this time, you already have an approved research title so that you can start writing your research introduction. So, here's an example of how to narrow down your research topic. A research topic is a broad subject matter of the study, for example, distance learning. Next, a research problem is a general issue or concern about the research topic that narrowed the topic. For example, lack of learners' knowledge about distance in distance education. Next, a research purpose or purpose statement is uh, the explanation of why your study is used to address the problem. So, for example, you have to study this research to know why learners do not attend distance education classes in a community college. And lastly, this is the specific problem, the research questions, so it narrows the purpose in specific questions that the researcher would like to answer in the study. For example, does the use of website technology in the classroom deter learners from enrolling in a distance education class? Now let's start writing your research introduction. This is based on the model of Swales in 1990. This is called the CARS model, or Create a Research Space Model for Research Introductions. And in the CARS model, there are three moves. Let's start with move 1, or establishing a territory or the situation. So first, in this move, the author sets the context of his or her research, providing the necessary background on the topic. So before you start, you first have to provide the background or the context of your research. You can do this by first indicating that a general area of your research paper is important, critical, interesting, problematic, relevant, or otherwise worthy of investigation. So ano ang mapapala ng inyong readers sa inyong research? Bakit ito kapaki-pakinabang at ano ang mapapala ninyo sa inyong research? So state the importance and why your research is interesting and relevant. Next, another thing that you can do is by introducing or reviewing in that area to show where gaps exist or where key sources of prior research has been inadequate in addressing the research problem. And this includes one or more of the following steps. You can do claiming centrality, or step 1. In this step, you describe the research problem and you provide evidence to support why the topic is worth studying. To claim centrality, the author might write, recently there has been a spate of interest in blah blah blah, or you can also write, knowledge of X has great importance for dot dot dot, or blah blah blah. Next, another step that you can do is to make topic generalizations. The author makes statements about current knowledge, practices, or phenomena in the field. And in this step, you provide statements about the current knowledge, the current state of knowledge, consensus, practice, or description of phenomena. For example, you may write, the properties of X are still not completely understood. Okay? Or X is a common finding in patients and or blah blah blah. So in this example, you explain the current state or the current knowledge or practices or phenomena of your chosen research problem. Step 3, you can also review previous items of research. For example, both Johnson and Morgan claim that the biographical facts have been misrepresented. So, yung claims daw, yung previous research, nabasa niyo for example, na yung results ni Johnson and Morgan, that biographical facts have been misrepresented, so that can also be done in move 1. Another example, several studies have suggested that reading to children early and often seems to have a positive long-term correlation with grades in English courses. And for step 3, when you cite the research of others, the author may use integral citation or citing the author's name in the sentence as in the first example. For example, just like here in the previous example that I showed you. Or you can also use non-integral citation where you cite the author's name in parentheses only, as in the second and third examples that I have shown earlier. The use of different types of verbs like shows or claims, and the verb tenses like in the past, present perfect, or present tense. Don't worry because you will have further discussion of citing sources as we go to the discussion of the literature review. So this is an example of a research introduction. This is an actual research introduction made by my previous students. They are already in grade 12. So the title of their research is The Impact of COVID-19 on the Mental Health of Social Workers by Mape Alimagno de Guzman in Maling 2021. So as you can notice in Move 1, they explained the context and background of their research problem. So they focused or they discussed about the role of social workers in the society. And then they also introduced key sources from prior research. So there are some they cited some findings from Ramasi et al. 2020, how do you pronounce this? Schreffrel, Petrie, and Huckery 2020. Ayan. And then they also included here some findings by Benros and Vindegaard 2020, Labrage 2020. So those are some of the things that they do or they did in Move 1. And as you can notice in this paragraph, they discussed the current state of social workers in today's world. Okay? Now let's move on to Move 2. This is the part where you establish a niche or you start introducing the problem. So in this move, the researcher or the author argues that there is an open niche in the existing research. So, pagkatapos nyo i-discuss yung background, pagkatapos nyo mag-introduce ng previous research, in the second move, you now explain and make a clear and cogent argument that your particular piece of research is important and possess value. So, kumbaga, sa pag-introduce or sa outline, pagkatapos ng introduction, yung body na. Okay? You can do this by indicating a specific gap in previous research, by challenging a broadly accepted assumption, by raising a question, a hypothesis, or need, or by extending previous knowledge in some way. So, paano yan gagawin? First, you can do counterclaiming. So, in this strategy or in this step, the author refutes or challenges earlier research by making a counterclaim. In this step, you introduce an opposing viewpoint or perspective or identify a gap in prior research that you believe has weakened or undermined the prevailing argument. For example, while Jones and Riley believe X method to be accurate, a close examination demonstrates the method to be flawed. So notice that in the example, after you stated the findings of the previous research, nirefute nyo siya or kinounterclaim nyo na this method might be flawed. Okay, so that is counterclaiming. You challenge or refute the claims of previous research. Next step that you can do is to indicate a gap. The author demonstrates that earlier research does not sufficiently address all existing problems or questions. So, kung hindi nyo gusto mag-counterclaim, pwede naman kayo mag-indicate ng gap. So, in this part, you develop a research problem around a gap or understudied area of the literature. For example, while existing studies have established X, they have not addressed Y. So, dun sa previous example na pinakita ko sa inyo, dun sa research nila MAPE, pwede na lang sabihin dun halimbawa, there are existing studies about the mental health of health workers, but there are limited studies that focus on the mental health of social workers. So, that is indicating a gap or yung puwang doon sa research. Ano pa yung pwedeng i-improve? Ano pa yung kulang? Ano pa yung pwede nyong pag-aralan? Step is question raising. So the author asks questions about previous research, suggesting that additional research needs to be done. So pwede rin na ganun ang gawin nyo sa Move 2. Pwede nyong sabihin na additional research needs to be done because maaring nag-update na yung information or may mga bago nang nadagdag. In this step, you do present key questions. You do present You do present key questions about the consequences of gaps in prior research that will be addressed by your present study. For example, while Jones and Morgan have established X, These findings raise several questions, including dot 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 dot. Okay? And you can also continue a tradition. So the researcher presents the research as a useful extension of the existing research. In this step, you extend prior research to expand or to clarify a research problem, which is often signaled with logical connecting terminology. For example, earlier studies seem to suggest X. However, to verify this finding, more work is urgently needed. Dot, 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 dot. So you can continue a tradition or to expand or to further explain a certain or a prior research. So this is an example of move to. Ito yung example pa rin nung research nila MAPE, the impact of COVID-19 on the mental health of social workers. So in this part, they indicate that a specific gap in previous research. Sinabi nila while existing studies have established an understanding on mental health problems of certain populations in the Philippines, such as students, teens, and adults of certain occupations, they have not addressed the mental health problems of social workers. So ito yung sinasabi ko kanina na nag-indicate sila ng gap. So that even though meron ng mga existing studies, walang nagpo-focus on social workers. And the last move is move 3 or occupying a niche. So for move 3, the author turns the niche established in move 2 into the research space that he or she will fill. And that is, the author demonstrates how he or she will substantiate the counterclaim made, fill the gap identified, answer the questions asked, or continue the research tradition. So, pagkatapos nyong pagsasabihin nyo nasa move 2, yung mga kakulangan, yung mga kailangan i-improve, kailangan extend, in move 3, you now explain kung paano nyo siya gagawin. The author makes this move in several steps described below. So, paano yun gagawin? You may announce how your study will contribute new knowledge or new understanding in contrast to prior research on the topic, and you also describe the remaining organizational structure of the paper. The initial step 1A or 1B is obligatory, though research articles stop after this step. So, ibig sabihin lang nun na hindi nyo pwedeng ulitin, hindi nyo pwedeng gayahin yung mga previous research. Kasi, bakit nyo pa siya gagawin kung nagawa na siya ng iba? Therefore, you must find something that is lacking, so, or that is different. So, paano nagiging iba ang inyong research? Yun yung explain nyo sa move 2. And then in move 3, paano naman, anong kinaibahan yung research ninyo na gagawin ngayon, and how will you contribute new knowledge? Okay? Because if you will not do this, your research is just a replication of your previous research. So, you can do this by first outlining purposes. In this step, the author indicates the main purpose of the current article. In this step, you answer the question, so what? Which clearly explains the objectives of your study. For example, in this article or in this research, the researchers argue blah blah blah. Or you can also say the present research tries to clarify blah blah blah. Another thing that you can do is to announce your present research. You describe the research in the current article, and in this step, you describe the purpose of your study in terms of what the research is going to do or accomplish. For example, this paper describes 3 separate studies conducted between March 2008 and March 2009. Or you can also do Step 2, announcing principal findings. So the author presents the main conclusions of his or her research, and in this step you present a brief general summary of key findings. For example, the results of the study suggest, or when we examine X, we discovered. And step 3, you can also do, or you can also indicate the structure of the research article. So you may say this paper is structured as follows. Now, for our example, ito pa rin yung topic na the impact of COVID-19 on the mental health of social workers. So, ang ginawa nila is they indicate how their study will contribute to new knowledge. So, they said, through this study, the researchers will be able to determine the impact of COVID-19 on the state of social workers' mental health, including the mental health issues at play, their attitudes towards the rising cases of COVID-19, and how it affects the mental health of social workers. Okay, so hopefully, na-clear na yung pagsusulat ng research introduction using the CARS model. So here are other examples of introduction integrating the CARS model. So for move 1, they claim centrality, step 2, step 3. And then for move 2, they in the study, they use counterclaiming, indicating a gap, and then continuing a tradition. And then for move 3, ang ginamit niya is outlining purposes or pwede rin gamitin yung announcing of present research. And another example is from a research article from the Journal of Second Language Writing by Miller in 1994. So they utilize the CARS model. So ginamit yung move 1, move 2, move 3, and then nag-step 1 ulit or claiming centrality. And then move 2, sa move 2 nag-indicate siya ng gap. Move 3, they announce or nag-announce siya ng present research, and then pwede rin na in-announce niya yung structure ng kanyang research article. Now this time, let's focus or let's discuss the statement of the problem. The problem should be stated precisely, accurately, and clearly. And it can be stated either in declaration or interrogative form. So, pwede siyang sentence type, objective, or research objectives, or pwede rin siyang in question type or in interrogative form. It can either be one main statement or question, or a series of statements or questions, or a combination of these forms. The problem should be defined in terms of the data that can be obtained. So, meron tayong dalawang uri ng research questions. First one is the leading research question. So, the leading research question is the data gathering question which pertains to the descriptive research question. This will provide the needed data to answer your concluding questions concerning the objective of your study. And then the next or the second type of research question is the concluding research question. From the word conclude. So yung kanina is leading, it will lead you to answer your concluding research question. Now the concluding research question from the word conclude, it could either be a comparative research question, relationship-based research question, or both depending on the objective of your study. Now, for the format, first you make a general statement of the problem or simply state the main purpose of your study. Cite the specific research questions in logical and sequential order in numbered format. So, for example, first example, this research aims to develop an evaluation model of a web-based tool used in test administration for grade 11 and grade 12 students. Specifically, it aims to answer the following questions. So, ito yung main purpose, isang paragraph siya. Specifically, ito yung mga questions. What are the commonly used web-based tools used in test administration? How are the web-based tools evaluated? And how could evaluation model be designed for web-based test administration? So, if you can notice, these two research questions are the leading research questions. Kasi, kailangan mo nang ma-obtain yung commonly used web-based tools and paano na-evaluate yung web-based tools bago tayo mag-proceed sa concluding research question, which is how could evaluation model be designed for web-based test administration. So, dapat logical or sequential yung pagkakasunod-sunod niya. Okay? Another example. This is an actual research question, a qualitative research question from my previous students. So, ang kanilang main purpose is, the study aims to determine the perception and reasons of homophobic people to the LGBTQ community. Specifically, the study will seek to answer the following questions. So, ang first question nila is, what is the perception of homophobic people to the LGBTQ community? So, usually, ang first question usually is what? So, kailangan alamin nyo muna ano yung una nyong kailangang malaman. So, in this case, ang una nilang gusto malaman is the perception of homophobic people to the LGBTQ community. And after nilang malaman yon, ang second question nila is, what are the possible reasons? So, pagkatapos nilang malaman yung perception, Ang kasunod na lamang gusto nilang malaman is the possible reasons why homophobic people have an irrational fear towards the LGBTQ community. So these two are the leading questions. And then, in the third question, how do the homophobic people overcome this irrational fear towards the LGBTQ community? So in this example, ito yung naging concluding question. So para masagot niya yung title at saka yung research problem, perception and reasons of homophobic people, nag-leading question muna siya bago magkaroon ng concluding question. So this is how you frame your research questions in the statement of the problem. Kailangang sunod-sunod siya. Bago nyo malaman yung reasons, tanongin nyo muna ano yung perception. Bago nyo malaman yung kung paano nila na-overcome yung irrational fear, tanongin nyo muna yung possible reasons. So, dapat sunod-sunod siya, sequential and logical. Next, let's move on to the scope and the limitations. So in this part, you have to indicate the boundaries, exceptions, reservations, and qualifications in your study. So, ano ba yung pinagkaiba ng scope sa delimitation? When we say scope, sakop, okay? It defines the coverage or boundaries of the study in terms of the area or locality and subjects, population covered during the duration or period of the study. On the other hand, when we say delimitation, from the word limit, these are the conditions beyond the control of the researcher that may place restrictions on the conclusions of the study and their application to other situations. In other words, when you say delimitation, it's the same with limitations of your study. Now, how do you write your scope and limitation? So, first, define the scope of your study. Ano yung sakop? Ano yung gusto nyo lang malaman? Kasi kailangan i-state nyo dito sa scope and limitation kung hanggang saan lang yung gusto nyo malaman and kung alin lamang yung inyong pag-aaralan. Okay? And you can also include here where and when the study was conducted, the variables included, and the respondents to be involved. And then, on the part of the limitation, you just cite the weaknesses or limitations of the study you anticipate and how you are going to handle them so that they do not become bottlenecks of the investigation. A limitation is a phase or aspect of the investigation which may affect the result adversely, but over which the researcher has no control. And very honestly, you should state this limitation as brings credence to the study. For example, ito ay research din ng aking previous student. This is as an example of a qualitative research. Their title is The Perceptions of Senior High School Students Towards Smart Shaming, Pelaez, Lainez, and Rodelas 2019. So, sa scope and limitations nila, nilagay nila yung purpose ng kanilang study or yung focus muna. So, the study focused on the perceptions of senior high school students towards smart shaming. The researchers considered six senior high school students as the subjects, as suggested by Morse, 1984, blah, blah, blah. On the number of participants when using phenomenology as the data gathering method. So, next is explain na nila yung limitation. This is limited only to senior high school students chosen to the critical case sampling. The research was conducted at, sabi ko kanina, indicate where you will conduct your study. And then, ano yung mga limitations or weaknesses na maaari nyo ma-encounter na hindi control ng researcher. Next, let us now discuss the significance of the study. From the name itself, when you say significance, ano ba yun? So, pag sinabi natin significance, ito yung importance, relevance, or ano yung mapapala natin sa inyong research. So, in this part, you include the importance of your study to the specific audience that the research is intended to. Importance of the study to the researchers, practitioners, and policymakers. And in this part, you should also include at least 3 reasons why the study is important and how the study helps to improve practice. So example, ang title na research nila is The Effects of Computer-Assisted Instruction in the Performance of Students in Asian History and Civilization. So first, lagay niyo muna the findings of the study may provide deeper insights on blah 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 blah. So dito sa first paragraph, ilagay niyo yung pinakang importance. Bakit mahalaga ang inyong research? So you have to include it in the first paragraph. And then, you have to indicate the beneficiaries. Sino-sino yung mga makikinabang sa inyong research. For example, ang una makikinabang sa research nila is the students. So, you have to write to the students and then explain bakit at paano makakatulong sa mga estudyante ang results at findings ng inyong research. So, example here, to the students, the results may serve as an inspiration for them to continuously improve their skills in using blah blah blah. To the administrators, this may guide them in program planning and limitation of the IT department. Okay, so that is the significance of the study. Next part is the conceptual framework. In this part, you will explain the concept and you will turn it into a framework. Kaya nga siya tinawag na conceptual framework. So, how do you do this? It is first defined as, or in the conceptual framework, you should be able to find the central theme or tema. Ano yung tema ng inyong research? The focus and the main thrust of the study. And it serves as a guide in conducting the investigation. On the other hand, when you say conceptual paradigm, it's diagrammic representation of a conceptual framework. So, magkaiba yung conceptual framework at conceptual paradigm. Yung paradigm, yun yung drawing or yung illustration ng conceptual framework. Okay? It depicts in a more vivid way what the conceptual framework wants to convey. A paradigm may take different diagrammatic forms. So, example, meron ditong IPO, ito yung usually ginagamit. So, the input, process, and the output. So, itong conceptual framework, pag ang ginamit nyo is input, process, and output, para kayong nagluluto. In the input part, dito nyo ilalagay yung mga ingredients ng inyong niluluto. So, sa research, ganun din. Bago kayo mag-data gathering, meron kayo dapat nakalagay na ingredients or input. So, ano-ano yon? Pwedeng yung mga research questions ninyo, RQs, or pwede rin mga theories. Please pardon me for my handwriting because I'm using my mouse. And then, pwede rin dito yung mga uh, theoretical framework or kahit anong magiging sangkap ninyo sa pag-gather ninyo ng data or pwede rin yung mga variables ninyo, research variables. Okay? Next is your process. So, dahil meron na kayong sangkap sa pagluluto, in the process, you will now indicate here ano yung procedure nyo sa pag-gather ng data. So, for example, lalagay nyo dito interview, o kaya focus group discussion, and then the last part is the output. So, pagkatapos nyo magluto, ano na ngayon yung maging finished product ninyo? So, ano yung magiging output or product after ninyong magluto? So, yun yung logic natin kanina. After ninyong mag-gather ng data, after ninyo mag-interview, after ninyo mag-observe or mag-focus group discussion. Okay? So, for example, the level of awareness of senior high school students on cybersecurity. So, this is an actual conceptual framework of my previous students na grade 12 na ngayon. So, in the input, they indicated their research questions and their variables. And then sa process, nakabulit, nakalagay kung anong ginawa nila, administer sila ng questionnaire, and then nag-conduct sila ng statistical treatment. And then in the output, after nilang gawin to, ang output nila is level of awareness of students and basis for educational frameworks about cybersecurity. There are other examples of conceptual framework that you can see in other research articles. And then after your conceptual framework, yun yung kanina, ito naman yung explanation. So, dapat, kapag may illustration, merong explanation. So, for example, The figure above describes the conceptual framework of the study wherein the input consists of the blah 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 blah. On the other hand, the process used by the researchers to gather data is through blah 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 blah. And then last part, the final output of the study is the level of awareness of students that can be a basis for educational frameworks about cybersecurity. So in this part, from the name itself, we define specific terms or unfamiliar words or technical terms that you will use or you are using or you will be using in your research. So we have two types of definitions. First is the conceptual definition. These are the definitions that can be found in the dictionary or any reference book of everyday language. And then when you say operational definition from the word operation, this is the meaning of the concept or terms that are used in your study and how you will use it in your study. So here's the format. First, you give an introductory statement of the content, identify the variables of the study, and list them in alphabetical manner. Use hanging indent and define the variables conceptually, then operationally. So, dapat dalawa yung definitions. Hindi pwedeng conceptual definition lang. Dapat meron din siyang operational definition. For example, ayan o, variable 1 naka-italicized, and then define it conceptually using universal or academic meaning and attributed to a group of words or words. This can be found in books, encyclopedias, magazines, and journals, and after the conceptual definition, define the key terms and phrases operationally or how these are taken to mean in your study. Operational definition is also known as functional definition. So for example, ito ay actual definition of terms nila Isles, Lagaya, and Marquez 2021. Ang kanilang research is immunity versus tolerance, factors influencing selected parents' decision on COVID-19 vaccination in Lucena City. So ito yung mga example. First, naglagay sila ng general statement. So nakalagay ito, the section defines the important terms used in the study. And the terms are as follows. So notice that naka-italicized, naka-indent, and then alphabetically arranged. And then, this is the, for example, first term, attitude. It refers to the degree, blah, 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 blah. So, meron siyang definition, conceptual definition na nakita sa dictionary or in other reference materials. And then, after that is the operational definition. So, in the study, attitude towards COVID-19 vaccines was used to determine COVID-19 vaccination intention among the respondents. Yan, ganun din dito, for example, is vaccination. Is the process of injecting a vaccine into the body in order to produce immunity, blah, blah, blah. In this study, the term was referred to as health behavior by which respondents would reveal their attitude towards. So, hindi ibig sabihin, konti lang yung unfamiliar terms, ay konti lang din yun nandito. Actually, itong definition of terms, ito ay extended version ng inyong scope and limitation. So, dito, pwede nyo i-define yung mga words na hindi lamang unfamiliar, pwede nyo rin i-define dito yung mga variables ninyo. So, as much as possible, ang definitions na kailangan nyong i-define, or terms na kailangan i-define, is a minimum of 5. Okay? Pero hindi dapat 5 lang. Minimum nga lang yun eh. So, dapat lahat ng variables na gagamitin nyo nandito sa definition of terms. Lahat ng unfamiliar, lahat ng technical words na andito sa definition of terms. Now, for your written work number 4, argue or not, you just have to indicate if it's a good research question or not. And for Okay, so for performance task number 4, this is a collaborative work. So this will be done by group. So yung mga tasks or roles na inassign nyo per group, kung sino yung searcher, sino yung encoder, sino yung moderator or monitor, dito nyo gagawin yung inyong mga tasks. Because in this part, you will be doing your introduction, statement of the problem, scope and delimitation, significance of the study, conceptual framework, and definition of terms. So, all in all, meron siyang 6 parts. So, pwede nyo rin siyang paghati-hatian, halimbawa, tigigisa, or kung nahihirapan, tigagalwa. Kada part, and then, pero, tigagalwa rin kayong parts. Okay? So, depende na sa strategy ninyo kung paano nyo siya hahati-hatiin among your members, but be sure that all of your members are participating. So, yung monitor, siya ang magmamonitor kung lahat ng groupmates ay nakiki-cooperate, lahat ng groupmates ay nakikisali. Ma'am, paano po yung aking group member na hindi nakikisali kasi siya ay printed, wala po siyang internet? Therefore, kapag ganun, pag magsasubmit siya ng module sa akin, bigyan niyo siya ng task. So, meron naman siguro siyang messenger. Bigyan niyo siya ng specific part and then kapag sinubmit niya yung printed sa akin, saka ko isesend sa inyo. Pero, pwede rin na sa inyo na directly isend or picturean. So, kung wala siyang kung printed man siya, pwedeng hard copy and then kayo na lang yung magko-compile. Okay? So thank you very much for listening and for staying in our discussion for week 4, which is the parts of the introduction. So if you have further questions, you may ask during our consultation time every Tuesday, 1 o'clock to 3 o'clock. Thank you very much and enjoy and happy writing.